This episode of Think Business Live. Looking forward to talking with Andy Tryba. Andy, it's great to connect with you. You're the CEO of Gigster. I'm looking forward to talking about how you make software development better. You're a smart software development service. You combine top developers, top designers, top product managers, kind of layer in artificial intelligence to build your projects. I love talking about AI. It seems to be changing every day, and I'd like a real-time snapshot, and so do the Think community. Wanted to start off as a business coach, Andy. I work with people all over the globe who are stuck and get them unstuck. And so I love this podcast. It's a platform where my guests can also do the same. And so where in your business have you had a recent stuck and then how did you get unstuck?
Yeah, John, thanks for having me, and always good to chat. Man, it feels like we get stuck every day, right?
Yeah.
Whether it be in Gigster or my overall holding company, Ionic, right? But one recent example is really around culture side of it, and I make this mistake all the time. And every time I do, I'm like, how do I make this mistake again? Which is basically hiring for competency and not hiring for really the cultural and the value side of it, right? And you always think, oh, I can, mold the person into the values that I need within my company and what have you. And that just never is the case. You're better off, training the person up on what you need versus trying to get them, really to shift on the value side, which you can't, right? So that's an example of I recently had a couple of senior management hires that just, great people, great competence, just misaligned a bit on the value side of it, which is kind of our corporation, and as a result, it never works out.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. It's one of the things as a business coach, one of the things I do with some clients is I help them recruit. And so I will be part of an initial 15-minute kind of Zoom interview to just kind of, get a review of them and then do some live interviews too. But it's interesting because sometimes it's such a sliver that you can't tell if they are right or wrong. And what I have come to find, and clients have as well, is when the sliver is there, they're wrong, no matter how close they are. But only hire great. Sometimes, the recruiters don't love to hear that because you're like, oh, this person was great, but this one sliver, right? And I have a client where, sometimes you even give offers or even before the offer phase where the email correspondence is so off that you think this is part of the interview process. So we can't. Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And again, because, you go through all these interviews and most of them are on the competent side, making sure that they're aligned on that side of the world. But they're, other than just some soft things on the value side, it's hard to really codify that. Right. Yeah. And sure, there's personality tests, but how do you really relate that back and what have you? So that's always, at least in my opinion, just oftentimes where we fail. It's like, how do you go in both of those? And if you are going to err on the side that is just 100% culturally aligned with you.
Right. If you're spending more than 5 to 10 minutes talking about is the right person, the wrong person, they're the wrong person.
Well, I couldn't agree more. It's hard to shake yourself off of it, right? Because they're competent, and you've interviewed all these people, and you're like, oh, these are the people, right? And so it's hard to convince yourself that no, this is truly a deal breaker.
Yeah, and that's why sometimes I think clients like me to be part of an interview process because I'm bringing a different perspective, and sometimes everyone's too close. I just want to say this before we move on to Andy. Something I find in the community is that people are recruiting reactively. And to me, recruiting should be a proactive, ongoing thing because you should be looking at your roster and looking and saying, okay, who may leave because A, they don't want to be here. Maybe they have life changes that they want to move. That whatever it is, you should always be recruiting so you're in a preventative, proactive space when recruiting and not desperate.
Yeah, John, I couldn't agree with you more on that because the problem with the reactive side too is that you then put tons of pressure on them, and I do this, and this is a big error that I make too, put tons of pressure on them right away. Be like, great, you're hired in, you're hired in to perform, get going. You're late, right? Basically, right? When in reality, it's like, no, you're late for hiring that person on a reactive basis versus a proactive basis. And furthermore, you should be like, great, let me give that person enough time to really understand the differences between where they came from and what they need to do in this new world, right? Because it's never one-to-one, right? So if you don't give them that time, they then go revert back to all the things that they've done in the past, which may not be the right thing for your business, right? So you have to sit back and like, no, just learn the organization, learn the people, like don't actually make any big decisions out of the chute. But if you go reactive on your hires and you're under the gun, you're like, no, I actually don't have time to wait. Right. You got to go. And then just all bad things happen. So this is another mistake that, that I make.
Yeah, no, recruiting is so hard, and you can hire the right person and still 50% of the people may leave within 3 years. But I'd love to talk about this a little bit more, because I think recruiting is really important. And people have a hard time. It's really hard to find great people today. And so you got to give your time. I think community, you got to give yourself enough time to walk through a process. Something I sometimes do if I'm helping people recruit, where Indeed is one of the vehicles, is I will communicate with someone and say, hey, call me at 12:10 on today, October 17th. And I purposely don't answer the phone. And the reason is because I want to hear their message. Because if they don't leave me the best message, that's part of the interview process. And then to extend that, if they don't try back in a couple of minutes, depending on what their role is, that shows their level of persistence and tenacity. So I think, for those of you who are going through the job interview process, the reason I bring that up is don't hesitate to have ridiculous follow-up. Remember that messages are part of the interview process, as are emails, et cetera, et cetera. Any thoughts?
I love that. No, I love that. And note to self, I got to make sure that I leave you a good message or something. But yeah, no, so I couldn't agree more, right? Because you're just trying to get good signals, right? Again, on that cultural side of it, on the competence side of it, the whole 9 yards. But the thing that I always tell people to do, though, is really look on a global basis for talent. We all still get stuck in this, very who is around my office, basically, like who's in my zip code, and like the best people in the world are unlikely to be in your zip code, right? I mean, you got to go expand your denominator of people. And I always use the analogy of a football team, right? I'm here in Austin, Texas. If I were to assemble a football team in Austin, there's 2 million people here, pretty good team, right? But if I expand my denominator to all the United States and choose 350 people and the best of the 350 million people, my US team is going to beat my Austin team, right? If I expand the denominator again to 7 billion people and like choose the best of 7 billion people, I don't think anyone would argue that the best football players in the world is going to beat my Austin team, right? But we don't think about our own squads that way, and it seems crazy that we don't. So the expanding the denominator is everything. Now you got to go solve other problems, right? Is how do you go find them? How do you go build culture remotely? How do you go, do asynchronous communication? All those other things, but those are easier problems to solve than not having the right people on your team.
Yeah, right. I mean, and it takes a lot longer to get somebody out of the team and to offboard them and to deal with the headaches of that. So, all right. So think community, if you can take anything from this conversation, only hire great, listen to your gut, and make sure you have an interview process. In my opinion, I'd love your opinion, Andy, that is 3 or 4 interviews long, because you want to make sure that the same person keeps on showing up. Sometimes by the 4th interview, they show up late, they're any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I love that too. And I would actually, we actually do a bunch of, assessments prior to that, right? So cognitive tests, personality tests, but most importantly, what we call real work assignments, right? Where you give them something that gives them a good insight into the job, but have them actually write up something. Or if they're a salesperson, like have them record a video of them pitching. Like those real world examples there's so much good signal in that even before the interview. And then all of a sudden you can get the competence out of it, and then really then focus your time on the cultural side of it. But I agree with you that you gotta, interview multiple times, multiple people, bring all that together, because you just, you are making a decision that ideally lasts, sometimes, for decades, right? So like the time you spend up front, and if they're not willing to go in put in that effort, like what are the odds that they're going to continue to put in the effort when things get really, really hard?
Correct. Amen. All right, good. I always love, this podcast, because I never know where the conversation is going to go. Let's talk about AI, because we're talking about, skills that I don't believe, to the extent that what we're looking for or talking about, a computer will ever be able to fully, or hopefully a computer will never be able to fully do. but yet AI is also shaping the entire landscape of so many different levels of business, and so, the that's a different topic. I'll bring that up in a little bit. But so talk about how you're using AI. How are your clients using AI from a software development standpoint? And how are they engaging you? Why are they using you? And what are they getting with you?
Yeah, obviously AI is one of the most transformational technologies that it's certainly in our generation. But we're still, I think everyone is, and I don't know where it is on the Gartner hype curve, if that's a height of expectations or falling down it or whatever else it may be. But in all scenarios, everyone's trying to figure out, how do you use this thing, right? How do I use this in real world scenarios where, sure, I guess if I'm trying to fire a rocket and land it on Mars, I get that. But like, how do I use it in recruiting? How do I use it against my database? How do I go use it, in ways that can actually fundamentally help my business? So that's probably the number one thing that we get is, hey, do you have a few experts that can just help me ideate a bit, right? Where we're like, we think that we want to use AI in this space, but teach us how, that different areas that you've seen out there between recruiting or business process or whatever, that we can go bring that in. And then that then leads typically to, great, let's go form a small team for you. Great, well, then identify a few things. Let's just form a small team to go do some of these MVPs, right? Not huge, big projects that are multi-year, but let's go try it out. Let's go use it against my database and make it private, so that, we're not pushing things out to, OpenAI and ChatGPT so that everyone can get it. Let's go do that within my environment and what have you. And then let's go experiment. And that typically then builds on top of each other, because it's hard to just be like, great, I want to go do AI and then go hire up a team. And you're like, okay, what are you going to do? I don't know, right? It seems like a really bad place to start, right? So you want to be like, great, what are some of those ideation projects? And how do you just get the smart people in the room to, start thinking about the business process side of it more so than even just the raw tech side of it?
Yeah. Yeah. So when people come to you, I just want to kind of get into the conference room of somebody who's looking at, different levels of software and what they need. What one or two questions should they be asking themselves to kind of, why they need your level of service? Because I think that's the question. I think what I see in boardrooms that I'm in are, they're asking themselves the wrong questions. They're kind of looking to see they're doing a review of where they are, where they've been, but the questions aren't getting them into a space where they need to go. And so one of the things I find as a business coach, that I'm asking questions that get them into a space they can't get to on their own. And so what questions should they be asking themselves, Andy?
Yeah, there's, particularly at the board level, there ends up kind of being a branch that occurs, right? There's hey, how do I look at my business internally to be able to make sure that I'm actually pulling together the right information to be able to go make decisions? There's a great stat that says that's, 73% of all of the data collected within enterprises are actually never used for decision making. And the reason is that, they're in different databases, they're in different CSV files. It takes a month to be able to pull the data together. So they're like, forget it. Let me just make a gut call, right? So all that data, though, does sit in your ERP or your CRM or whatever else it may be. So how do you then use AI to go pull that information and be able to enable you to talk to the data, right? I believe that's going to be one of the biggest use cases at the boardroom is like, guys, I'm not interested in a 65-page PowerPoint deck that someone pulled together. Like, let me just talk to the data. Let me just ask it questions, just like ChatGPT, and follow-up questions and follow-up questions and follow-up questions. Because then all of a sudden you can get to the atomic level and be able to make decisions. So there's a boardroom discussion that is around that, which is how do you go, really, keep that data internal, but be able to have it all talk to each other. And that's the beauty of kind of a lot of the AI tools that exist today. And then the other branch that we see often is like my roadmap, right? I had a roadmap for my product, and then AI comes into the picture, right? Now, how do I then go change my roadmap to go utilize that AI to make things just dramatically easier?
Yeah.
Right? Again, along those same use cases, right? Where you're like, great, like a lot of even my companies are like, great, just dramatically changes ease of use. Yeah. Right? If you think about what the iPhone and Apple did as a whole, right? They just made it easy. You could hand an iPad to a 2-year-old, right? And they can start swiping, right? But you can't like you can't hand most products to a 2-year-old and have them go do anything. But like, why not? Right. And that's where, again, AI really starts changing the roadmap and saying, like, I can go make it dramatically easier. Right. And ChatGPT is a good example of, like, if you make it easy enough, you get just unbelievable adoption rate. So how do you go do that with your own product? So both of those end up being the branches that boardrooms really need to think about, and what we see from it when they come to us.
Yeah, I love that. There's something that I think a lot of companies get wrong. I see, I work with solopreneurs to Fortune companies, everything in between. And to your point, the curse of knowledge, right? And the curse of knowledge states that people buy it at 2 or 3, at 1 out of 10, people buy it at 2 or 3. If you start going above a 3, you're losing people. The way I interpret that is you want to keep things to a kindergarten to 2nd grade level. As soon as you get to a 3rd grade level, you start to lose people. But I agree with you. You got to keep it easy. And something else I just want to comment on, Andy, that I think is so interesting as you're talking about that 73% stat number that doesn't get used. It's interesting, Think Community. A lot of times what I hear and see when I'm working with executives and managers, of making high level, big decisions for multi-billion dollar decisions. They have a lot of people in the room and they've done calculation after calculation. And then sometimes I ask, well, have you actually talked to the department or anyone in it or the customers that you're running all this laggard data with? And they say, actually, we haven't. So I just want to send out that reminder that just the phone, right? AI is amazing. I love AI. I love ChatGPT. I love everything. Right. But the phone and picking up and talking to our current customers and talking to our department heads and the people, down to the every level of the business, they'll give you a lot of what you need in real time. So I just want to kind of point that out as I see it within companies, because sometimes, to your point, I think even companies internally make things more difficult than if they just kind of thought about it like a kindergartner. There's a great TED Talk by Jeff Hoffman, the founder, and I think he's still the CEO of Priceline, called The Power of Wonder. I don't know if have you seen it? And
I haven't. That sounds great.
You got to check it out. It's right. It's exactly what you're talking about, what we're talking about today. You'll love that. And it reminds me like of the movie Big. Remember, did you ever see the movie Big with Tom? When he's in the conference room and he's like, I don't get it. They're all talking about the data. And so there's got to be that balance. Okay, so rewind with me now, and just from the minimum age of 10 years old, who was a mentor in your life that planted seeds to make you who you are today?
Man, there's so many. Like, I lean heavily on mentors, even today, right? Where there's nothing like getting coaching, right? It doesn't matter. If you look at the best athletes in the world, they all have coaches. They all have cameras on them. They're all trying to learn, right? On how do they, go turn the wrist and pronate the wrist, whatever it may be, right?
So, absolutely.
But it's unfortunate that a lot of us in the business world, particularly as you get higher up in the business world, that we don't. Right. We don't actually talk to coaches enough, and we don't really, we all think, oh, and our business is different. They can't understand that. But like we were talking about earlier, no, it is consistent. Like, how you hire for values, it doesn't matter what kind of business you're in. How do you go drive to metrics? How do you go, look at partnerships, right? Like my business partner and I love him to death. It's when you're doing a business partner, there's still things you got to work through, just like a marriage, and things you got to work through, right? So it helps to go do that. Right now, there's a great book behind me by a gentleman by the name of Jim Hewling. It's called 4 Disciplines of Execution.
That's so good.
And I love this book, but he's also our coach, right, from a partnership side as well as me individually. And I get so much out of our discussions. Just simply not only, obviously, great book, but then also just, all of the insights into hiring, into culture, into managing, all of those things that help us from a mentorship perspective matter a ton.
Yeah. It's interesting. Right before this call, I had a client say to me, he was saying how much he loves that we're in maintenance mode. But I said, we're not really in maintenance mode. We're in preventative mode. Because as I looked at things and I said, well, can you quantify what we talked about today? He said, "Oh, I can quantify it, to growth here, 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 and here." I said, "Well, that's not maintenance. That's preventative, right?
Yeah.
Because you would have been on the wrong path otherwise." And I'm not patting myself on the back, nor trying to impress, but just to impress upon that sometimes you need to have that space to kind of talk things through, to kind of really see what that kind of that simple next step is. So I love that. I love that. All right, let's do a quick speed round. You just mentioned one book, but what's another book that has had a big impact on you?
I mean, another one over my shoulder here, Deep Work by Cal Newport. It's awesome, right? Just all about ensuring that you spend long stretches of uninterrupted time, like really dedicating yourself cognitively to a problem to be able to get you to the next level, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's literally like we all task switch so much, we don't allocate our time properly. Like, man, that's a dramatic impact on the way that I look at my calendar on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I love Deep. That's a great book. Best piece of wisdom you've ever received?
As trivial as it may be, is to enjoy the journey, right? I think that, like, man, we are racing so fast and so hard to get to that destination and point that we put so much pressure on ourselves, right? We're like, no, guys, like, you got to enjoy it every day. And it was like, actually my wife the other day, because I was talking about, oh man, it's so great to be able to go watch these movies with our kids, to like unplug the brain and just step out of reality.
Yeah.
Like, listen, like if your life is requiring you to have to step out of it to go, do something else, like maybe you need to relook at the way that you think about your day to day. I'm like, man, you couldn't be more right.
Yeah, I love that. All right, last question, Andy. Finish this sentence. One thing everybody can do. I'm going to go back to what we initially talked about. One thing everybody can do to hire great.
Go use the entire 7 billion people in the world to choose from, and then choose the best out of that.
Great. One last question, actually.
Sure.
Finish this sentence. One thing everybody can do to get a little bit more comfortable every day with AI.
Play with it.
Yeah.
I think the ChatGPT is a good example of like just playing with it.
Yeah, I love it. All right. Tell everybody where they can connect with you, learn more about you, and use your services.
Sure, certainly. Gigster.com, certainly there. But then you can also find me on Twitter at Andy Tryba, and happy to help out.
Awesome. And Think Community, you can reach me at jondwoskin.com. I just want to highlight a couple things, Think Community. I love this podcast because I get to have guests like Andy on that can share great insights and help you get unstuck. Hire great and make it easy. If you can do that, then it takes. If I had more time, I'd write a shorter speech, right? Mark Twain, Winston Churchill. So to get to easy is not always easy, but make the time and create the space. Thanks, everybody. If you need Andy, please reach out. If you need me, please reach out. Andy, stay on for a minute and we'll catch up. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks.